Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and as promised in my last video, I said I was gonna do some cards with the large Thankful Magnolia stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. But before I get to that, I wanted to do my backgrounds, and I'm just sticking some Canson XL watercolor paper to MISTI sticky mats that I have trimmed down. Another option is you can just tape these to a hardboard. Anything will work like that. Just it helps keeping the paper from really curling when you're adding so much water, because you know it wants to curl up and then everything runs off the edges and it's just annoying. So stuck them to my little sticky mats, stuck these on top of my flour sack cloth just to contain more so just the water, because again, spraying heavily. And right now I'm being very subtle. I know I'm not doing like full on rainbow, but I wanted to use this first color was the Ivory Willow. This is the newest shimmer powder from Nuvo. My order just showed up last week. I forget. Anyway, it's very subtle, but oh, it's pretty. So I used just that on the first piece on the right. And then the other one I used Jade Fountain, which I've shown in previous videos. I think this was the other like newer one that came out, a few months ago. Every time I see a new color of shimmer powders, I'm like, yes, must order. Anyway. Sprayed those, added the powders, added some water, set those backgrounds aside. Just subtle. I'll get to the rest of it after they're dry. So while those are drying, I've got my MISTI out. I have the great big Magnolia image. I flip my MISTI around, which I don't know why. To me, this is backwards. This is how it's meant to be used. I don't know why. I can't. I don't know. I can't use it like this. It's weird. But for this image, it works better to use the MISTI in the proper way. So I have more Canson XL watercolor paper. I used my anti-static powder tool on it. And then this image I inked up with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, which is slow drying. So that way I can add clear embossing powder. You don't have to do this, but anytime I'm doing a technique like this or like watercoloring in general, I do like the image to be heat embossed because it gives that little bit of raised edge, which keeps things a little more contained so that I don't have to be as precise or as, I guess, thoughtful. Not that I'm not thoughtful, but it just having things with the raised edges, I don't have to worry so much. I can just kind of do my thing. So I did this twice, stamped the image, coated it with clear embossing powder, melted it with my heat tool, turned it back and forth in the light to make sure everything is shiny and raised and melted. If there's like dull grainy areas, they just haven't been melted yet, blast those with the heat tool, good to go. I didn't bother taping these down at all, even though I do use a fair bit of water, but I'm going to die cut these, so that would flatten it out anyway. So I've got my images. I have just a little plastic palette here, and I am using several colors of shimmer powders. So I'm using Falling Leaves for my green, and then I did Lilac Waterfall, which is a purpley shade that has like some pinks and blues mixed in there as well. And then in the one well there on the far right, I added some of the Lilac Waterfall and a little, just a smidge of Cherry Bomb. That's the one I've been using with all my rainbow colors. Cherry Bomb is a very intense color. You don't need very much of it. Watch my last video to see why. So anyway, and then for the yellow, I used Sunray Crosette. I hope I pronounced that right. And then the final color is Golden Sparkler, because I needed a brown. And this actually isn't a brown, but I'm going to make it brown, which I'll show. So to watercolor with this, simple. Super simple, especially an image like this. I felt intimidated by this image, even though, yes, I've done a bajillion videos using large florals and all that stuff. I'm not super familiar with Magnolia blossoms, even though I say it to everyone. It's like, florals are forgiving. You can do whatever you want. It's true. But for whatever reason, this one intimidated me. But now that I've colored it, I love it. I love it. It's so pretty. And it was easy. Regardless of what type of medium you're using, whatever floats your boat. But things like The shimmer powders, the Lindy's magical powders would probably work very similar. I will have videos coming using those because my orders are starting to show up. And anyway, color burst powders, all of those sorts of things, they have a mind of their own. But you could also do the same thing with like watercolors or water reactive inks, you know, distress inks, oxide inks, etc. Basically, I just laid down water and then I just start dropping in color. I'm not being super finicky about it. I started with the Lilac Waterfall and then I would go in and add that little mixture of the Lilac Waterfall and Cherry Bomb. And that's what I mean by like Cherry Bomb is a powerful color. It just kind of took over, but I was okay with that because I wanted that more intense sort of pinky purple color. So after I did the first bloom, I did the exact same thing to the second bloom, just went in a little harder with color, really. You know, I always find that my first, if I'm doing multiples of the same image, my first one is always, I'm a little more hesitant. You know, I'm just seeing it, feeling it out, seeing where things are going to go. And then the second one and onwards, if I'm doing more than, you know, 2, I'm just like, yes. And I just go in and, you know, throw down the color. So that's what I'm doing. So I just went along painting these colors, letting them kind of do their own thing. I'm just using my little, you know, cheapy Nuvo brushes, the same ones I've been using for however, I've lost count of how many years I've had these. Don't need fancy brushes, don't need fancy tools. Sometimes they're nice for certain things, but with this, whatever. Okay, to make the brown, I had that golden sparkler color, and then I added the pink and the purple to it, and it just deepened it, and it became like this gorgeous, like chocolate brown color, and it's shimmery. That's also what I mean by the, you know, you don't need to be a fancy colorist or anything, especially if you're using something like shimmer powders. The shimmer does the work for you. You know, I'm not doing any fancy layering of colors other than the pink and the purple, but I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm not adding, you know, specific shadows anywhere or that sort of thing. Like, I do love that. I love watching other people do it. Every once in a while, I will get a little more fancy with my coloring, you know, and I'll do some layers and things like that. But experimenting with shimmer powders, they do the work for you, really. So for the centers, that's what I used the little Sunray Crozette color on. And then what was left on my brush, I just like literally kind of slapped it onto all the leaves because it's a yellow color, and I knew it would mix in with the green and it just gives it a little extra something. So at this point I started using 2 brushes. I have my bigger brush that has all of the like shimmer powder and liquid in it, like it's really intense, and then my smaller brush is mostly clean, so I would use the smaller brush to pull out the color and move things around. I'm holding the bigger brush in my mouth. That's just, it works. My tools are my own and I don't have to share with anyone. So 99% of the time I'm holding things in my mouth because I don't have enough hands when I'm creating. So I'm just going back and forth, painting all the leaves with that falling leaves color and that little bit of the Sunray Crozette, and just enjoying the process. And it didn't take very long. This is obviously sped up in editing, but painting both of these did not take very long because I've got the raised edges from the heat embossing and the shimmer powders are doing most of the work. So sometimes people ask like the specific, you know, how long did XYZ take? And most of the time I can't answer because I don't often time myself. You know, I'll see it on the timestamp when I'm editing, but I think it was under 20 minutes to do both of these. It wasn't very long. So anyway, once everything was painted, I finished it off with, there's like little tiny florals, and I just used like the pink and purple mixture just to quickly paint those. And then once all of those were painted, I set those aside to let them dry. My backgrounds are now dry, still subtle, but that was the point, and they're shimmery. This new Ivory Willow color is gorgeous. It's like literally an ivory sort of color and just solid shimmer. So I pulled out this is just some Ranger opaque matte texture paste. This container's old, so old. I've got press and seal on it. I think that's the only reason it hasn't dried out, is because the press and seal is keeping it from completely drying out. This container is years and years old. So I put some on a palette here, and I started mixing the ivory fountain or ivory willow shimmer powder in the one on the right, and then I'll mix the jade fountain color on the little pile on the left, as well as I added a little bit of water because, again, this paste is old. It was really thick and a little bit dry, so I was like, I'll just add a little bit of water. And I was just playing, mixing the powders. These, again, are going to be subtle because these are subtle colors of shimmer powders. If you use more intense colors like the cherry bomb, the blues, the purples, etc., like there's a lot of like way more intense colors, you won't need as much powder. So I would recommend starting just start slow and tiny little amounts. With these, I was already getting kind of familiar with the low intensity, I guess, of the actual color. So I was able to add like a bit more powder, added a little bit of water, mixed it up with my palette knife. Once I was happy with it, I pulled out the tin tile stencil. This is the same one I used in the video I posted. Well, depending on when I get this video up, but it was a video I did before this. Anyway, my tin tile stencil still actually has some pixie spray on the back. People ask me about that. I just put it back in the packaging as is. It takes a little fiddling to get it in and out of the packaging when it's a little bit sticky, but it's not super sticky. It's just got that light tack and it's perfect. So I just stuck it on top of the background. So the one I used with the ivory willow color, I then applied the embossing paste or the texture paste that I'd mixed with that same powder over the stencil. Remove the stencil, stuck it to the second background, and then I'll add a bit of this paste to this one as well. I purposely didn't want to apply it evenly, and I didn't want to cover the entire background because while you cannot really see it in camera, I will show, at the end with my flashlight, etc. And it just, the camera can't pick it up, but in real life, the shimmer and even the texture paste, it does have shimmer. It's subtle, but it's there, and it's so pretty. So I applied that to the backgrounds, set those aside to dry. While those are drying, I'm going to die cut my main images here. I've got the die that coordinates with this set. So I die cut both of those. And then for my sentiment, I decided I wanted them also to be shimmery, because why not? As like I like to say, go big or go home. So I took those same colors, the ivory willow and jade fountain, put them in a palette, and then I just took some Canson XL watercolor paper and just one of my little flat tonic brushes, and I painted a section with the one color, painted another section with the other, because I am going to die cut this. So I painted it, I dried it, and then I did a second layer. These are streaky when you do it specifically like this, especially when you try to like layer them up, because it starts reacting or reactivating the original layer. I wasn't too concerned about that. I just wanted the color and the shimmer, So painted a second layer, and then once that was dry, I die cut these with Simon's, is it Big Thanks? Yes, Big Thanks wafer die. This came out forever ago. 2017. It's an oldie but goodie favorite. So die cut the shimmer portions with that, and then I just die cut scraps of the same watercolor paper with that wafer die so that I can stack them together with some craft tacky glue, as is tradition, because I like my sentiments to have that dimension to them. So I adhered a couple layers together, and then the top layer is the one that I die cut from the little shimmery panels that I created. And after I'd done that, I had die cut the outline from that Big Thanks die set from black cardstock, and then adhered the sentiment to that. And then I repeated the process with the second sentiment. So set those aside. My backgrounds are dry, so I trim these down to be slightly smaller than an A2 card. I was going to do 5x7, but I didn't plan things out properly ahead of time because the floral itself, like the panels I stamped the florals on, weren't big enough. So in the end, I made these into just A2 cards, but you could totally do 5x7. This Magnolia image is definitely big enough for a 5x7. So keep that in mind, because you can see here, I'm stamping it on the inside of the card. It takes up the whole inside of an A2 card. So I'm lining up my card base inside my MISTI, now using it the way I like to use it. I don't know why. To me, because it's like, this is how you would open a book. Like, even though I know you can see the numbers are always upside down. I've done a bajillion videos using this. I don't know. It's habit now too. You know, flipping it around to me is weird. Anyway, I masked off the score line of the card base, and then I stamped that Magnolia image with Simon's Fog ink, just a nice light gray ink. And then I adhered my finished panels to the fronts of both of these card bases. Once these are adhered into place, I just set them underneath my MISTI just to hold everything down, because, you know, they're a little bit warped with all the water, the embossing paste, etc. So set those under the MISTI so that they can dry flat. And then for these large florals, I just lined them up kind of how I'm going to place them on the card, flipped it over, and then I just used a pencil to trace the edges of the card onto the back of these panels. This just saves me from placing foam tape where I don't need it, because it legit bothers me when I have pieces hanging over and if I have to cut through the foam tape as well as the, you know, cardstock or watercolor paper, whatever. It just annoys me. So the pencil lines give me that little visual guide. It's like, don't place tape past this point. So I did that with both of these panels, and then I used Simon's Big Mama foam tape because it'll give it that little bit of dimension without being too thick and bulky. And I kept them upside down and just pressed the card into it following those little pencil lines that I had made. So just quick and easy. Pop that down, pressed it into place, repeated it with the second one. And then once I have these adhered to the card fronts, I can then flip them back over again and trim off those little bits that are hanging over with scissors, just using the edge of my card base as a guide. So sometimes my brain works, you know, with the proper thought process. I just didn't, like I said, I didn't plan ahead to make them into proper 5x7 cards. This worked too. It really did. I almost didn't think it would because I didn't want to cover up too much of the backgrounds because they really are pretty. But yeah, these were still a lot of fun to make, and just, oh, the shimmer. Anyway, the die cut sentiment I adhered with craft tacky glue. I used my little T-square ruler to make sure it's straight. And off camera, I had stamped that little so much sentiment is from the Magnolia set. And I had stamped that with the same VersaFine Onyx Black, or VersaFine Clair Nocturne. It's the same thing as VersaFine Onyx Black as far as I'm aware. Anyway, stamped that with the Nocturne ink, and I had clear heat embossed them onto white cardstock and then just trimmed them down with my paper trimmer. So I adhered the die cut sentiment and then the little stamp sentiment, and then as a, you know, final bit of embellishment just to add to the bling, I'm using these little Studio Katia round iridescent gems that I've used in a ton of videos recently. They're perfect and they go with everything. So sprinkled those throughout both of these cards. And then I'm just going to adhere them into place with little dabs of craft tacky glue using my little Studio Katia embellishment wand. So once these are adhered into place and the glue dried, these cards are complete. So I'm going to turn the flashlight on my phone and just, you can see some of the shimmer. I really wish there was a way I could properly capture it. I swear my camera just is like, nope. I actually took multiple shots of this trying to like just show the shimmer. You can see some of it, especially on the blooms. It really shows up. But again, the backgrounds are so shimmery. And then when you really take a closer look at the stenciled embossing paste areas, there is that the shimmer does show up with this embossing paste. I was quite impressed with how I knew it would tint it with color, but I wasn't sure if the shimmer would show through because it's an opaque matte, you know, texture paste, but it did work. So I'm going to have to play with this some more. So just stay tuned. You guys get to, you know, enjoy the results of all my, you know, messing around and experimenting. So that finished off the cards for today. As always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list. I'll link to all the supplies I used. I will also have a link to my shimmer powder playlist because I've done a lot of videos using shimmer powders, which you can apply to all sorts of other similar products. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.